Live and local, every afternoon 2 to 4. This is Mark, Melinda, and Ed on News Radio KLBJ. Call or text them at 512-836-0590.
Appreciate the heck out of your show. Been listening for a long time.
Now, Mark, Melinda, and Ed.
Mark Caesar is back with you tomorrow along with Melinda Brandt and Ed Clements. I'm Kenny Romeyer. Glad to have you with us on this Monday afternoon. And we start off the hour with a special guest. Ed?
We certainly do. On the KLBJ News Live line is our Congressman Michael McCaul, who serves much of the KLBJ listing area. Congressman, thanks for taking some time from your busy schedule. And I got to ask you, are the sanctions working against Russia in this war against Ukraine? Are the sanctions working, Congressman?
Yeah, and first, I think it's great to be on your show back home in Austin, but they are. I think we could be doing more, but when we sanctioned the central bank in Russia, the ruble plummeted, and I think those sanctions are very strong. I've been an advocate for not carving out the exceptions in the sanctions for Russian energy, pleaded the administration not to import Russian energy. We should be creating that on our own in this country. But that's the weakness of the sanctions. But they are having an impact, but it will take time. And what we really need is to get those weapons into Ukraine so they can defend themselves.
Well, let's ask you about that. Do we have any updates on the MiG planes, Congressman, of getting those into the hands of the Ukrainians? And there's a story out today that the Biden administration is releasing some decades-old Soviet SA-8 of air defense systems that the Ukrainians can use that equipment. Any difference makers there?
Yes, and I came back 2 weeks ago. I was on the Poland-Ukrainian border. Saw the refugees coming in. We met with the 82nd Airborne trying to get the weapons into country. The MiGs were discussed at that time. I think the original plan was that the Ukrainian pilots would come into Poland and simply fly them across the border. It seemed to make sense to me, and it broke down. The administration was divided over this. But I do think most of all, symbolically, this is what President Zelensky has asked for, and I think symbolically we should have done that. With respect to what they really need, I think these lethal drones are very effective, maybe even more so than the MiGs because they're hard to detect and they're not manned, so you don't risk a human casualty. And then secondly, what you're referring to is the S-300. We have our Patriot battery system. We're obviously not going to put that in there because the Russians could gain access. But these old Russian anti-aircraft, that's what we're trying to get in country right now. They have some, but this is incumbent upon our NATO allies on the eastern flank that have the Russian S-300 to get that in country. And this administration needs to work it out with them how to backfill their stockpiles.
Congressman McCaul, I think a question that a lot of people have is there a point in this Russia-Ukrainian war where we can no longer sit on the sidelines, to say, where we have to do more than just providing the weapons that we are?
Right, and that is the ultimate question. I don't think anyone wants to be in a World War III or escalate it to that point, but it's kind of like watching a bully beat up a kid on the playground, and we're all standing around with one hand tied behind our back just watching it. And it's hard to watch the images coming out of Ukraine right now, and I know it is for most Americans. I think when I talk to the administration, and I've urged the president to talk to our allies, is that we're going to need to talk about red lines. And what are those red lines? He's threatened to use chemical weapons. That would be in direct violation of the Geneva Convention. He also has these short-range tactical nukes that are always a part of their battle plan that we're very concerned could be launched as a provocative statement, for NATO to stay out. Finally, they just launched 2 hypersonic missiles yesterday, which are kind of the best of what they've got. It didn't have nuclear warheads on it, but it's a shot across the bow, I think, in their strategy. They call it escalate to de-escalate.
Congressman Michael McCaul with us to talk about the Ukraine-Russia situation. Would you characterize Vladimir Putin as a desperate man right now, What is your level of concerns about his mental capacity and what he could be doing in the next few weeks or months?
Well, there's been a lot of speculation. I get the briefings on his health. It is called into question, his mental as well, because he's very isolated. I think he's very angry. I think, as we were told, his military advisors told him this would be over in 3 to 4 days. And guess what? That didn't happen. We overestimated the Russian military and underestimated the Ukrainian people. This resistance has been very inspiring, but it's making Putin very angry, which is why you're seeing this civilian casualty now. His goal now is to break the will of the people, and to do so, he's going to kill indiscriminately, as we have seen with maternity hospitals, the theater, people in bread lines. This does equate and puts him in the status now of a war criminal, what he's been doing.
As we begin to wrap up with Congressman Michael McCaul, the White House has a press conference going right now, Congressman, and they've talked about Russia exploring cyber attacks. Have you heard any of the latest on that front?
Correct, and we've been concerned about that for quite some time. They have very good cyber capabilities. We've anticipated this. Interestingly, they haven't really delivered any yet. They've been sort of a dog barking but not biting, but I'm concerned the bite's going to hit. And traditionally, when we have sanctioned them, they do retaliate with a cyber attack that would not only be in Ukraine, which could hurt their infrastructure, but hit us here in the United States, not unlike what we saw with the Colonial Pipeline. And if it's coming, if the attribution's coming out of a Russian entity, it's coming straight from Putin. I mean, don't be fooled. He controls these operations and tries to hide behind saying he wasn't behind that operation, but he does control those. And I do think you're looking at energy sector, financial institutions really being top of the list.
President Biden is expected to go over to Europe this week. Do we have any expectations that changes anything with him making a personal trip?
I think, we need to show American leadership and not let other countries lead. We have always been the force behind NATO, and it's important that he go in country. And I'm glad to hear he's going to Poland. I hope he goes to the Ukrainian border to see, what I saw. He's been very cautious and doesn't want to be provocative like with the MiGs. And, I understand all that, but his projection of weakness, in my sense, has invited a lot of this aggression. So I'm glad he is going over there. And I do hope, again, he talks about these red lines in terms of what's going to be acceptable to NATO and what's not when it comes to weapons of mass destruction.
We have to let you go on this one, Congressman. Any new insight into the latest on some kind of deal on Iran and their nuclear interests?
Well, this is another. I mean, we are literally putting ourselves at the mercy of, the Ayatollah and the Russians calling the shots on this. Now, the E3, that's Germany, and France and England are involved in these talks. I think they're very close to a deal. I got briefed by the negotiators in a classified space, last week. It will be very similar to what we passed in 2015 with very short sunsets. That would be a year to 2 years, which would, in my judgment, guarantee a nuclear Iran. That's going to be a whole other can of worms to deal with.
Congressman, thank you so much for the visit. Much success, and hope to see you around Austin very soon. But thanks for being with us on KLBJ.
Yeah, always, Ed, and thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Congressman Michael McCaul on Mark, Melinda, and Ed with Kenny on
and
KLBJ.
Your thoughts and